It's Friday, and welcome to the first edition of Real Polling in Real Time with Zogby. This is our fifth year anniversary of doing this podcast, and we have decided to rebrand it, and that's something we're going to talk about a little later. Jer, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Happy anniversary with our podcast.
Yeah.
So we want to do three things today. We have some new presidential numbers, and they are, I think, really fascinating. So we'll dwell on those a little bit. Then secondly, you go behind the scenes a bit and try to assess the president's base and the president's opposition, for that matter, from the point of view of media watching habits. And you've got quite a story to tell. And then thirdly, we'll just take a couple of minutes and explain the rebrand at the end, why we're doing what we're doing. That sound okay?
That sounds perfect.
All right. So let's start with the president's approval numbers. It's been a wild 3 weeks, but in our polling just this week of 1,001 likely voters, what we've discovered is that the president's disapproval rating actually mirror right to the percent his popular vote victory in November. He won 49 and change to 48 and change over Vice President Kamala Harris. And that's where we have him, 49% approve and 48% disapprove. So no movement at all, despite controversy, despite really a lot of things. And so I think when we look behind those numbers, though, we see some really fascinating demographics, as we did during the election. The president seems to not only have obviously consolidated his MAGA base, his Republican base, his conservative base, born-again Christians, evangelicals, 68% approval. That's even higher than it was on election day. But Jer, he has solid support, in fact, even growing support among members of the so-called Obama coalition. It's a good approval rating from young voters, from Black voters, from Latino voters. And what's going on there? What do you see?
Yeah. Well, the young voters, as you alluded to, the Obama coalition that you reported a lot during the Obama presidency and after. I mean, my understanding was for a while that was kind of like the holy grail of a coalition, that if you could excite women, who are more than half of the electorate, 18 to 29-year-olds, and in this case, it's tracking millennials, and then Hispanics, and then the Black vote, that could almost guarantee you a win. And what we've seen since, and a lot of other people covered this in their election polling, we did as well. Hispanics went for Trump. The Black vote, particularly younger and young men, went for Trump, and so did the young vote in general. And a lot of this could be summed up or understood as something like the anti-hero or the underdog, I think is a better. Somebody gets beat up so much and they get attacked so much that it can often have the effect of a growing appeal. And so all throughout social media, you could see this leading up to the election with young Black men. You could see on Twitter or X that them saying, one video that jumped out to me that I thought spoke volumes was one guy said, Trump is he's getting the people treatment. He's getting the kind of treatment that I get. And this guy's driving through, Philadelphia, and in the background is the inner city of Philadelphia. And the implication was at any minute this guy could get pulled over by the police, and he could get ticketed, or he could get arrested, or he could get hassled. And he was making the point, this is what's happening to Trump. So when you see the media going after him with such intensity, it's almost like take a closer look. And so that's why in this poll, I thought it was important to see, not just what media do you consume, but if you boil it down, what do you place your trust in most? And so we divided it into local news, which could be TV, online, print, national networks, which could be on the TV or going to the CNN or NBC, CBS, ABC website. Of course, that's going to include Fox News. National newspapers, the Times, the Post, of course, also the Wall Street Journal and beyond. And then social media as a distinct news source, podcasts distinct, and talk radio distinct. And what we found, no surprise, talk radio, the part of the original MAGA support, 80% approve. 80% of those who trust talk radio the most approve of Donald Trump. But those who trust most social media, it goes up to, I believe it was the 60s, 60% or so approve of Donald Trump. And then those who follow podcasts, it was 70%. And so typically, and I'm going to wrap it up now, we're used to looking at this, in a partisan view or a political party ID view. Where are the independents? Where are the Democrats? Where are the Republicans? Of course, age is huge, and other key demographics like race. But what we find here is the real divide in your perception of the president's approval or disapproval, or just perception of his leadership in general, comes down to the great divide of the traditional news sources like networks and newspapers. And if you read those, you have a very low approval rating or opinion of Trump. It falls to the 40s, low 40s, high 30s. Or if you're going to podcasts, and this is where people are going, these free-form 2-3 hour discussions, and there's a bunch of them, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, and hundreds of others, you see the world differently, because the real divide is, this coincides with the millennial generation. Those who, to bring this full circle, those who once supported and perceived Obama as the champion and carried him to victory, now as they move into their 30s and 40s, a lot of them have become homeowners, a lot of them have become parents, they are siding with Donald Trump. This is where they're getting their information from, and they've moved away from the networks and the newspapers, and I don't think they're going back.
Okay, fascinating information, and as always, a brilliant analysis. So what's going on here? For starters, for many, the last 3 weeks have been on the verge of Armageddon, and so what we do find is the country really split down the middle. 49-48. Remember, there's opposition, and among that 48 that disapprove, 39% strongly disapprove. So there's high intensity really on both sides. The irony is that in the middle of what we've often referred to as a revolution, where everything is changing all at once, and you have the president and Elon Musk as real agents for change. At the same time, ironically, the two guys who are not in any way, shape, or form what you could refer to as everyman, the average Joe, they are perceived as everyman. They are the ones that are leading the rage against the machine. They're not just shadow boxing. They're doing it. We're talking about, this has gone beyond disruption. And when you're talking about abolishing agencies, as we speak, within hours, USAID will have 300 employees left, as opposed to thousands upon thousands. Justice Department, FBI is being gutted, even though a judge has blocked the president's offer of a buyout and immediate resignation among 2 million federal employees. He's only blocked that until Monday. I think it's actually a she, actually blocking it until Monday. But we're talking about using the metaphor of really tossing the salad, and yet it's being done without any consensus in this country. And that's got people worried. And frankly, I will always, as I always have done, present the numbers. And I'm still baffled by the numbers because people that I talk to are really worried. And that now includes even some conservatives. And it certainly includes people who are dependent on the federal government in some way. And yet the president's got, he's not upside down. He's just slightly right side up, approval, disapproval.
Yeah.
Final comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, just to go deeper on, what I'm saying is the real divide, in terms of where voters are getting their information, not only just where they're getting information, but what they're going to trust. Those who read closely the national newspapers and those who follow closely the national networks, in trying to understand this, why that's such a great divide, I think, let me try to attempt to shed a little light on it. Newspaper and network news is kind of like, that's the choice of the expert class, because those who work in the network news and those who work in the national newspapers they're the experts. They're the journalists. They're the perceived professionals, and they get to have kind of more or less the final say on the packaged product. And in the case of network, there's a lot of production that goes into that. And in the case of the newspaper, there's editorial boards, and so there's kind of this packaged information, and those who put their trust in it are vastly more likely to see Trump negative, because maybe that's the starting point from these institutions. But, not to say that social media is freeform, because there's a lot of algorithms, but at least people can choose. They can, go on a YouTube, they can go on Facebook or X, and they can type in their the figures they want to look at, the figures they want to follow and unfollow, and read 100 or 200 comments and like what they want to like and dislike what they want to dislike. And then, of course, podcasts, it's raw. There's very little post-production. Watch a Rogan episode to really understand that experience. And that's what's going on. Those are the mechanics of why we, voters are so different in their perceptions of Trump, because of where they get their news. And I would just say to really be mindful of that trend and follow that trend, because I think that coincides with essentially, more or less, major generational changes.
So just moving quickly into the final segment, as I've mentioned, this is our 5th anniversary of the podcast, and I'm reminded of Zogby's Real America. We had when it was Zogby International in the 90s and beyond, we launched a monthly newsletter, Zogby's Real America, and we started to veer in a different direction with point, counterpoint, a conservative column and a liberal column, and other news, and a very good reporter, one of the best. In fact, I'm going to mention him, Dick Benedetto. a friend and longtime White House correspondent for USA Today, wrote to me and he said, look, if I want point counterpoint or debate, I'll read the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Atlantic and so on. He said, what I look to you guys for are polling numbers, data. That's what you do. Stick to the data. And so I was reminded of that. We've been doing this podcast, and it's been quite successful, right? We're very happy with the growing listenership, viewership, and so on. But we needed to be reminded of what we really do. And what we really do is generate accurate polling numbers. And so that's what we're going to do. And every week we're going to talk about those numbers because you really can't get that this way anywhere else. And get it also from two different generations and I'm not going to say ideologies, but let's say two different points of view.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. We often cited in the last 5 years polling data, often our own polling data, but often other polling firms. But I think I know going forward, the focal point will be our latest and our greatest information every time on real polling in real time with Zogby.
And as a final note, you're going to see the same backgrounds, the same people, the same attitude, the same everything. Unlike the networks and the cable TV, we're not going to introduce a whole new set, different persona, wild graphics, people talking way too fast. That's not what we do. This is what we do. You know what? Let us know what you think. Keep letting us know what you think. Respond wherever you watch it, read it, or listen to it. Let us know how we're doing. Have a good week. Garrett?
Have a good weekend.
Take care.